begins with pawn to a4, pawn to a5, knight to f3. Now in this position, most players expect black to develop calmly with knight to c6, but there is a far more aggressive choice. Strike back immediately with pawn to d5, the daring Elephant Gambit. In most cases, your opponents are going to capture this pawn on d5, sometimes the other one, and we'll talk about both options. If they take this pawn, you don't recapture. Instead, you keep attacking with your pawn to a4, continuing to challenge their position. Now white is standing at a crossroads, and none of their options look very appealing. The knight cannot move to g5 or h4 because your queen controls those squares. If the knight moves to the center of the board, you can simply capture the pawn on d5 and chase the knight away once again. We'll return to that idea in a moment. Sometimes, your opponent will try to solve their problem by playing queen to e2, pinning your pawn and attacking it. At this point, there are several possible responses, but the most aggressive one is bishop to e7. Here, you deliberately sacrifice the pawn, letting them capture it. But by doing so, you tempt them into a classic beginner's mistake, because they'll keep dancing around with their queen, giving you extra tempos for your development. Now, since your king is in check, you need to block the attack, and after the exchange, it actually helps you develop another piece with tempo. At this stage, your opponent realizes, hey, I need to develop too, and plays bishop to b5, trying to threaten you along the diagonal. But we don't care. We're already deep into gambit mode. You can simply allow them to capture, because in the Elephant Gambit, opponents often get greedy and start taking your pieces one bite at a time. So they capture again, and now they're targeting your rook. But here's the twist. It's almost unbelievable, yet white is already virtually lost. From this point onward, it becomes extremely difficult for them to defend. You continue with rook to b8, and now comes a brilliant sequence. Suppose white plays the natural move, knight to c3, a move you'll see in nearly every opening. However, in this position, it's actually a losing mistake. You respond with a surprising move, rook to b4. At first glance, it looks strange, but there's a powerful reason behind it. After any move by white, you follow up with bishop to b7, and suddenly the queen has nowhere to go. Your rook cuts off key escape squares, your bishop and knight cover the rest, and before they realize what happened, their queen is completely trapped. Moreover, notice how white's own knight blocks the c3 square, the very square where the queen could have safely retreated. That's why knight to c3 turns out to be such a costly mistake. Now you might be thinking, isn't this just a cheap opening trick? But it's really not. Even if white plays correctly and simply castles, you still have plenty of strong attacking ideas. For instance, you can immediately play bishop to b7, targeting both the queen and the knight. Or even stronger, you can push forward with rook to b6, creating multiple threats at once. It's actually very difficult for white to find a safe square for their queen. Suppose they retreat it, since the knight no longer controls that square. Now you can jump your knight into the attack, once again forcing the queen to move. Depending on where it goes, you can follow up with bishop to a6, striking along one diagonal, or bishop to f6, cutting across the other. Your rook dominates the b-file, your knight controls key central squares, and suddenly, every escape route for the queen seems blocked. If white tries to sidestep the danger with queen to a5, you can smoothly shift your attack toward the king's side. Play knight to f4, bringing yet another piece into the assault. From there, your bishop, rook, and knight all join forces, building up an unstoppable attack, one that comes together faster than your opponent could ever expect. Moreover, there's also a winning combination here, and it works after virtually any move by white. Let's say they once again play knight to c3, the usual mistake that loses the game outright. Here you can sacrifice your knight on g2. This instantly blows open the position around the king, exposing it completely. Then, you swing your rook over to the king's side, delivering a check. The king is forced to move, and on your next turn, you can simply capture the queen and win the game with ease. In fact, rook to g6 also creates a discovered attack on the queen, but if you really want to humiliate your opponent, instead of capturing the queen, you can calmly play bishop to b7. There's absolutely no defense along that diagonal. For example, if they get greedy and capture your queen, you reply with bishop takes f3. Checkmate. Now, if you prefer something a little less risky but still powerful, there's another elegant trap. Suppose your opponent plays queen to e2, pinning your pawn on a4 to your king and attacking it. You can simply defend by developing your knight to f6, a very natural move. If they try to press the issue with pawn to d3, attacking your pawn once again, you can't move the e4 pawn yet, so you counter by capturing the pawn on d5, which also defends e4 at the same time. White is still optimistic and plays knight to c3, creating a double attack. But not so fast. You bring out your bishop to b4, pinning their knight. Now everything is counterpinned. It's a tense and tactical position where both sides are tied down. If white tries to break free with bishop to d2, aiming to unpin their knight, you can simply capture it. After the exchange, their bishop remains pinned, and you can safely castle. At this point, your opponent starts calculating. They think they found something clever, but they're walking straight into your next trap. Alright, so white thinks they're being clever. I'll capture here, and after you recapture, I'll take the pawn on a 4. I'll be up a pawn and ruin your kingside pawn structure. They're feeling confident, until you flip the script. Instead of taking the bishop, you capture the knight first, a brilliant counterstrike. Now their queen and bishop are both under attack, and they're going to lose a piece no matter what. After the trades, you're simply up a knight in the endgame. Their little check doesn't matter, you just step aside and their attack is over. There's also an even trickier path. After pawn to d5 and they capture, you can play aggressively with pawn to a 4, challenging the knight. Great for black. But if you want to be sneaky, go for bishop to d6, setting a subtle trap. White develops with knight to c3, guarding the pawn, then bishop to c4, reinforcing it again. That's when you strike with pawn to a 4. The knight has to move. No matter where it goes, you simply castle. And they'll often castle too, therefore they'll pick between knight to d4, thinking everything is normal. But in the Elephant Gambit, normal moves are often the ones that lose the game. At this moment, you have a devastating tactical shot. The Greek gift sacrifice. You play bishop takes h2, fearlessly offering your bishop to draw the king out into the open. This classic idea has been winning games for centuries, and it works beautifully here. After the king takes the bishop, you immediately jump in with knight to g4, opening a direct assault. The king is now exposed, and all your pieces are ready to strike. If the king retreats to safety, you calmly bring your queen to h4, threatening checkmate on the spot. Desperate to create an escape route, your opponent might shift the rook, but that only delays the inevitable. Instead of rushing the finish, you capture the weakened pawn on f2, and after queen takes f2, the game ends in a few precise moves, with your queen and knight combining for a beautiful checkmate. Of course, not every opponent will sit quietly and wait to be checkmated. Some will try to counterattack, lunging forward with their knight to hit your pawn. But you don't even need to react. You just castle, keeping your king safe and your attack intact. Soon, that ambitious knight finds itself stranded in enemy territory. You play rook to e8, pinning it to the king and cutting off all escape routes. No matter how white tries to defend, the knight will fall, leaving you with a winning position. Even if your opponent avoids all that by castling early, the Greek gift is still waiting. Once again, king takes h2 followed by knight to g4 check tears their position apart. When the king steps aside, your queen slides in with perfect timing, first to h4, then to h2, delivering yet another crushing checkmate. Sometimes white will try to capture in the center, attacking your queen to buy time, but ironically, this only helps your plan. You bring your queen to h4, exactly the square you wanted all along, and then strike decisively with queen to h2, ending the game in a flawless attacking masterpiece. Thanks for watching.